The wind howled across the Wyoming plains, kicking up dust that stung Gideon Nash's weathered face as he stood on his porch, squinting at the horizon. His calloused hands gripped the railing, the wood worn smooth by years of waiting. The stagecoach was late. It wasn't unusual. Storms, bandits, or busted wheels could delay things out here, but today, it gnawed at him. He'd been alone on this ranch for a decade, save for his horses and the ghosts of his past. Today, though, everything would change. Magnolia Pierce, his mail-order bride, was coming. A woman he'd never met, known only through a few curt letters, was about to step into his solitary world. His heart thudded, not with love, but with the weight of a decision he wasn't sure he'd made right. The distant rumble of wheels snapped him out of his thoughts. A black speck grew on the horizon, the stagecoach cutting through the endless sea of grass. Gideon adjusted his hat, his stomach twisting. What kind of woman would answer an ad to marry a stranger in the middle of nowhere? He'd described himself plainly: 35, rancher, widower. No mention of the nightmares that woke him screaming or the secrets buried deeper than the roots of the cottonwoods by the creek. The coach pulled up, dust swirling like a specter. The driver, a grizzled man named Holt, tipped his hat. "Your bride, Nash." The door creaked open, and she stepped out. Magnolia Pierce was not what he'd pictured. Her dark hair was pinned neatly, her green eyes sharp as a hawk's, and her simple dress clung to a frame that spoke of strength, not fragility. She carried a single carpetbag, no frills, no fuss. But it was her gaze that stopped him cold. She looked at him like she already knew him, not just his face, but the shadows he hid behind it. "Gideon Nash," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "I've been waiting to meet you." Her words carried an odd weight, like she'd been waiting longer than the months since their first letter. He nodded, awkward, and gestured toward the house. "Long trip. You must be tired." She smiled, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. "Not as tired as you are, Gideon." His brow furrowed. He hadn't said a word about being tired, though God knew he was, bone-deep, soul-weary. He brushed it off as a figure of speech, but as they walked to the house, her eyes lingered on the scars on his knuckles, the ones he'd earned in a bar fight he'd never told a soul about. Unease coiled in his gut. Inside, the house was sparse: a table, 2 chairs, a stove, and a bed in the corner. He'd built it himself after Sarah died, every nail a penance for failing her. Magnolia set her bag down and surveyed the room, her gaze pausing on the small wooden cross above the fireplace. "Sarah's?" she asked. Gideon froze. He hadn't mentioned Sarah in his letters. Not once. "How'd you know her name?" he asked, his voice sharper than he meant. She turned, her expression calm but piercing. "You loved her. It's written all over this place." Her answer was vague, but it didn't settle him. It was like she'd reached into his chest and pulled out a truth he'd locked away. He busied himself with the stove, avoiding her eyes. "Supper'll be ready soon. You can rest." She didn't move, just stood there, watching him. "You don't trust Easy, do you?" she said. It wasn't a question. He grunted, stirring the beans, but his mind raced. Who was this woman? The agency had vouched for her, but her words, her knowing looks, they were like keys turning in locks he'd bolted shut years ago. As the fire crackled, she sat at the table and pulled a small journal from her bag. She flipped it open, her fingers tracing lines of cramped handwriting. "You ever wonder, Gideon, if some things are meant to find you?" she asked, not looking up. He didn't answer, but the question hung in the air like smoke. Over supper, she spoke little, but every word felt deliberate, like she was testing him. She mentioned the creek out back, how it must be low this time of year. He hadn't told her about the creek. When he asked how she knew, she smiled faintly. "I pay attention." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The air grew thick with unspoken questions, and by the time they finished eating, Gideon's nerves were frayed. He didn't believe in ghosts or fate, but Magnolia Pierce was starting to feel like both. That night, he gave her the bed and took a blanket to the barn. Sleep didn't come. The wind rattled the boards, and his mind churned with her words, her eyes, the way she seemed to see through him. At dawn, he found her already awake, standing by the creek, staring at the water like it held answers. "You dream about her, don't you?" she said without turning. His blood ran cold. Sarah's face haunted him every night, her screams, the fire, the night he'd failed to save her. He'd never spoken of it. Not to the preacher, not to the bottle, not to God. "What are you playing at?" he demanded, his voice low, dangerous. She turned, her eyes steady. "I'm not playing, Gideon. I know things. Things you've buried." She stepped closer, and he fought the urge to back away. "I know about the fire. The guilt. The man you killed to protect her." His heart stopped. He'd shot a drifter who'd come for Sarah, a man whose name he'd never learned. The body was buried under a cottonwood, unmarked, forgotten by everyone but Gideon. Until now. "Who told you?" he growled, grabbing her arm. Her gaze didn't waver. "No one told me. I just know." He let go, his hands shaking. This wasn't possible. She was a stranger, a woman from some agency back east. But her words cut too deep, unearthing secrets he'd sworn to take to his grave. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She tilted her head, studying him. "I want to help you, Gideon. But first, you need to trust me." Trust her? He barely trusted himself. Yet something in her voice, her unflinching stare, made him wonder if she was a threat, or a lifeline. Days passed, and the tension grew. Magnolia settled into the rhythm of the ranch, but she was no ordinary bride. She'd fix a fence before he asked, cook meals that tasted like memories he couldn't place, and speak in riddles that left him reeling. One morning, she handed him a tin cup, the same kind his mother had used when he was a boy. "Found it in the shed," she said. But he'd never owned a cup like that, not here. When he pressed her, she only smiled. Some things find their way back. He started watching her closer, searching for clues. Her journal was always with her, pages filled with notes she never let him see. One night, when she was asleep, he crept into the house and opened it. The words were gibberish, strange symbols, not English, but one page had his name, circled, with dates, the day Sarah died, the day he'd killed the drifter, the day he'd placed the ad for a bride. His hands shook as he closed the book. She wasn't just a woman. She was something else. Something he couldn't explain. The next day, he confronted her. "What are you, Magnolia? Some kind of witch?" She laughed, but it was a sad sound. "No witch. Just someone who sees what others don't." She reached into her bag and pulled out a locket, old and tarnished. Inside was a picture of a young girl who looked like Sarah, but younger, her eyes bright with life. "This was my sister," Magnolia said. "She died in a fire. Like your Sarah." Gideon's knees buckled. "You're lying," he whispered, but the locket felt real, heavy in his hand. "I came here because of her," Magnolia said. "Because of you." He stumbled back, his mind a storm. Was she Sarah's sister? But Sarah had no family, he'd known her since they were kids. Or had she? His memories of her early years were hazy, blurred by love and grief. Magnolia stepped closer, her voice soft but relentless. "You've been running from it, Gideon. From what happened. From who you are. I'm here to help you face it." He wanted to scream, to throw her out, but her words hooked into him, pulling at truths he'd buried. Over the next week, she unraveled him. She spoke of things no one could know, the night he'd cried alone after his first horse died, the prayer he'd whispered when he thought he'd lose the ranch, the exact words Sarah had said before the fire took her. Each revelation was a knife, cutting deeper, but also a strange relief, like lancing a wound. He started to wonder if she was sent, not by the agency, but by something bigger. Fate. God. Or something darker. One night, a storm rolled in, lightning splitting the sky. Magnolia stood on the porch, unafraid, as if she'd called the thunder herself. "There's a truth you're not ready for," she said, rain soaking her dress. "But it's coming." He grabbed her shoulders, desperate. "Tell me now. All of it." She shook her head. "You're not ready. But you will be." That night, he dreamed of Sarah, but her face morphed into Magnolia's, and she was holding a gun, pointing it at him. The next morning, a stranger rode up to the ranch, a man in a black coat, his face scarred and hard. "You Gideon Nash?" he asked, his voice like gravel. Gideon nodded, his hand on the revolver at his hip. The man smirked. "Heard you've got a woman here who knows too much. She's dangerous, Nash. You don't know what she's capable of." Gideon's blood ran cold. "Who are you?" he demanded. The man leaned forward. "Someone who's been hunting her for years." Magnolia appeared at the door, her face pale but composed. "Leave, Caleb," she said to the stranger. "This isn't your fight." The man, Caleb, laughed. "It's always my fight, Maggie. You can't keep running." Gideon's head spun. Maggie? Was that her real name? Before he could ask, Caleb drew his gun. Gideon was faster, his bullet catching Caleb in the shoulder. The man cursed and rode off, blood staining his coat. Inside, Gideon turned on Magnolia. Who was he? What's going on? She sank into a chair, her calm cracking. "Caleb's my past. Someone I hurt. He thinks I'm a monster because of what I know." She looked at Gideon, her eyes pleading. "I see things, Gideon. Things that haven't happened yet. Things that have. It's a curse, not a gift." He stared at her, torn between fear and fascination. "And me? Why me?" She reached for his hand. "Because you're part of it. Part of something bigger." The words hit him like a bullet. He stumbled toward her, the world narrowing to her face. "Sarah," he whispered, impossible hope rising. She shook her head, tears falling. "Not Sarah. But I knew her. And I know you." She reached for him, but before their hands touched, a final shot echoed. One of Caleb's men, not quite dead, had fired. Magnolia crumpled, blood staining her dress. Gideon caught her, his scream tearing through the night. As she lay dying, she pressed the locket into his hand. "Find the truth," she whispered. "It's not over." Her eyes closed, and she was gone. He buried her by the creek, next to the cottonwood where he'd buried the drifter years ago. The locket stayed in his pocket, a weight he couldn't shake. Months later, he opened it again. The picture inside had changed. It was no longer Sarah and the girl who looked like Magnolia. It was him and Magnolia, standing on the porch, smiling like they'd never known pain. He dropped it, his heart racing. The wind howled, and for a moment, he swore he heard her voice, "I'm still here, Gideon." He never remarried. The ranch stayed quiet, but the creek never ran dry again. And sometimes, at night, he'd find her journal open to a new page, filled with words he couldn't read, but he knew they were meant for him.